A 75-year-old millionaire married a young student, but what she did 7 days later was unbelievable. Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories. James Carter adjusted the weight of his worn backpack, the books inside feeling heavier with every step as he ascended the cracked steps to the modest apartment he shared with his mother and younger brother. It had been a long day, his body aching from the exhaustion of balancing work, school, and the endless burden of keeping his family afloat. His father's sudden death over a year ago had shaken their world, leaving them struggling both emotionally and financially. As he opened the door, the faint smell of rice and canned vegetables filled the air, a simple dinner his mother, Loretta, had prepared. It wasn't much, but it was a meal, and in this small apartment, it was all they had. Elijah, his 14-year-old brother, looked up from his homework, his brow furrowed in mock disapproval. "You're late again, James," he said, his voice a mix of concern and youthful annoyance. "I thought your shift ended earlier today?" James sighed, setting his bag down. "Got caught up," he muttered, ruffling his brother's hair. "How's the math homework going?" Elijah shrugged, grinning with pride. "Easy stuff," he replied. James gave a small smile, but his eyes immediately found their way to his mother, Loretta, emerging from the small kitchen. Her movements were slow and deliberate, her pale face a stark reminder of the toll her illness had taken on her body. He could see the faint tremor in her hands, and a wave of concern washed over him. "Ma, are you okay?" he asked softly. Stepping closer to her, Loretta smiled weakly, brushing him off as she always did. "I'm fine, baby," she said, her voice laced with exhaustion. "Just a little tired. Don't you worry about me." But James knew better. His mother had been battling diabetes for years, her health deteriorating steadily since his father's passing. The medical bills were mounting, and they had no way of paying them. Yet, Loretta insisted on being strong for them, hiding her pain behind a brave face. As they sat down to dinner, James's mind wandered, the weight of overdue bills pressing down on him. How long could they keep this up? The thought of losing their apartment, of not being able to get the care his mother needed, gnawed at him. Despite Elijah's chatter about school and his own dreams, James couldn't shake the feeling that they were all sinking deeper, and he was running out of ways to save them. The following days seemed to blur into each other as James juggled the relentless demands of school, his part-time job, and the crushing weight of his family's financial struggles. His part-time job as a server barely covered the basics, leaving little room for the mounting bills that seemed to multiply every week. Every evening, after his shift ended, he would come home to his mother's tired smile, trying her best to mask the toll her health had taken, and Elijah's youthful optimism, which only made the pressure James felt more suffocating. He longed for a break, something, anything, that could offer a glimmer of hope. One evening, as James sat at the kitchen table sorting through the stack of overdue bills, his phone buzzed with a message from his coworker Jordan. "Hey man, the fundraiser I told you about is this Saturday. Free food, drinks, could be a good opportunity to network." The text read. James frowned as he read it. Networking? In a world of wealth and privilege that seemed so far removed from his own? It seemed absurd, but as he set his phone down, his mind couldn't help but wander. Maybe, just maybe, this was the kind of opportunity he couldn't afford to pass up. A chance to step into a room full of people who had the power to change his life, if only for a moment. At dinner that night, Elijah enthusiastically encouraged James to go. "It could be your shot," Elijah said with wide-eyed excitement. James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't even have anything to wear." Loretta, who had been quietly listening, spoke up with unexpected determination. "You've worked so hard for this family, James. If there's even a chance that this event could help you, then you should go." Her voice, though weary, carried a strength that James hadn't heard in a long time. With a nod, he agreed. The days leading up to the fundraiser felt like an eternity. He borrowed a suit from an older neighbor, a suit that was too big, but it would have to do. When the day finally came, James stood outside the grand estate, feeling the stark contrast between the luxury before him and the crumbling sidewalks of his neighborhood. The towering gates loomed before him, and the polished luxury cars lined the circular driveway, gleaming in the golden light of the setting sun. He swallowed hard. adjusting the borrowed jacket and taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The mansion was a sight to behold: crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and the air filled with the clink of champagne glasses and polite conversations. James felt out of place, a stranger in a world of opulence. He was still grappling with his discomfort when a voice interrupted his thoughts. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," came the warm, yet curious voice of an elderly woman standing beside him. James turned to find a woman, elegantly dressed with silver hair and a kind smile, studying him with gentle interest. Yeah," he stammered, unsure of what to say. "I'm not exactly used to this world." She laughed softly. "I think you're not the only one." She introduced herself as Evelyn Walker, and despite her years, she had an easy grace about her. "Networking is important at events like this," she said, "but it's easy to get lost in the crowd. Why don't you come with me for a bit? You look like you could use a break." Gratefully, James followed her to a quieter corner of the room. The noise of the crowd faded as they sat down, and Evelyn began to speak in a tone that was both warm and sincere, asking about James's life, his dreams, and the struggles he was facing. As they talked, James found himself opening up. For the first time in a long while, he felt like someone was truly listening. He told her about his battle with the weight of his family's debt, his mother's illness, and the challenges he faced being one of the few black students in his law school class. Evelyn listened intently, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know what it's like to feel out of place," she said, her voice soft. "But don't let that stop you. The world needs people like you, people who will fight for what's right, no matter the odds." Her words struck a chord deep within him. Evelyn didn't just see a student struggling to make ends meet, she saw a young man with potential, with heart, and with the strength to make a difference. The night wore on, but James couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn's words. For the first time that evening, he began to feel a glimmer of hope, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to have in a long time. The next morning, the sunlight filtered softly through the cracked blinds of James's small apartment. But it did little to lift the weight pressing down on his chest. His mind raced as he replayed the conversation with Evelyn over and over again. The idea of marrying a woman twice his age, with no romantic interest but simply for the sake of partnership, felt surreal, like something out of a strange dream. And yet, the thought of what it could mean for his family, the chance to pay for his mother's medical bills, to send Elijah to a good school, to free them all from the suffocating grip of poverty, was impossible to ignore. Each of Evelyn's words echoed in his mind. Opportunities like this don't come often. Sometimes, the hardest choices lead to the most profound changes. James had never considered himself the type to take such a drastic leap. The idea of trading his pride for the sake of his family filled him with confusion and self-doubt. Could he really marry a woman for financial stability, with nothing to offer her in return but a shared name? Could he live with the weight of the decision, of the looks, the whispers, the questions? But then there was the alternative: his family's continued struggle, his mother's worsening health, and Elijah's dreams slowly slipping away. He felt cornered, like there was no other way out. That night, after another grueling day at work, he found himself sitting at the small dinner table with his family. Elijah was excitedly talking about his school, his voice filled with the enthusiasm only a 14-year-old could have, while Loretta, his mother, worked quietly beside him, trying to hide the tremors in her hands. James couldn't focus on anything Elijah was saying. His thoughts were consumed by the decision that loomed over him like a storm cloud. "James, you've been quiet," Loretta said, her soft voice snapping him back to the present. She reached across the table and placed a fragile hand over his. "What's on your mind?" James swallowed hard. He had always tried to protect his mother from the weight of their struggles, but the burden was becoming too heavy to carry alone. "I got an offer," he said, his voice thick with hesitation. "A woman wants me to marry her. She's older, a lot older, but she says she can help us, help pay for your treatment, get Elijah a good education, get us out of this mess." Loretta's brows furrowed in confusion, but she didn't interrupt. She let James explain, her eyes never leaving him as he shared the details of Evelyn's proposal. As he finished, he braced himself for her reaction, unsure of what to expect. Loretta's silence stretched on for a few long moments. Before she finally spoke, her voice tinged with a quiet strength. Baby, you've been carrying us all for so long. If this woman sees something in you and wants to help, maybe it's not about what's right or wrong. Maybe it's about what you can do with the opportunity. James blinked, shocked by her response. You think I should do it? He asked, his voice small. I think, she said gently, that you're a good man. And sometimes good men have to make tough choices for the people they love. Her words cut through his confusion, leaving him with a quiet sense of clarity. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps this wasn't about the right or wrong of it all. It was about making sure his family survived. And maybe, just maybe, this could be the break they so desperately needed. 2 days later, James found himself standing at the gates of Evelyn's grand estate once more. His heart pounded in his chest as he rang the doorbell, each chime like a countdown to a life-altering decision. Evelyn greeted him with the same warm, steady smile she had worn the first time they met, her silver hair catching the sunlight as she led him inside. James, she said, her voice calm, I didn't expect to see you so soon. I hope you've had time to think. He nodded, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. I've thought a lot about it, he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. And I'll do it. I'll marry you. Evelyn's smile softened, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and gratitude. You've made a brave decision, James, she said. I promise you won't regret it. As the days passed, the whirlwind of preparations began. James found himself signing legal documents, arranging a small, private ceremony, and trying to accept the surreal reality of what he had agreed to. On the day of the wedding, everything felt like a dream. Evelyn, dressed in her elegant navy gown, standing beside him at the altar. The soft murmur of the ceremony, the quiet applause from the few guests in attendance. When it was finally over, and Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, her voice filled with quiet emotion. Thank you, James, for trusting me. It was done. The impossible decision was now his reality. And as he left the chapel that day, he realized that his life had irrevocably changed. But in that change, there was a glimmer of something greater, a chance to carry forward a legacy, to give his family a future, and to fight for the very things that had once seemed out of reach. James stood before the large wooden desk in Evelyn's study, the weight of his new role settling heavily on his shoulders. The room, filled with the scent of polished wood and the soft rustle of leather-bound books, felt like both a sanctuary and a prison. Evelyn, sitting across from him with her usual quiet grace, gestured for him to take a seat. There was a calm in her eyes, but also an unspoken urgency. Her frail hand rested lightly on a stack of papers. And for the first time, James noticed just how much it trembled. She was growing weaker by the day, and yet her resolve remained unshaken. James, Evelyn began, her voice steady but tinged with weariness. Now that we're officially partners, there are a few things I'd like to discuss. First, the Foundation's work, its mission, and the plans we have going forward. She slid an envelope toward him, its crisp paper a stark contrast to the vulnerability he felt in the air. This contains everything you'll need to understand the direction we're headed in. It's not just about continuing what I've built, it's about carrying it forward with vision and compassion. James hesitated before taking the envelope. Inside, he found a meticulously organized collection of documents, detailed plans for the Foundation's future, and notes on its current projects. Evelyn's handwriting, elegant and precise, filled the pages. It was clear from her words that she had put everything into this work, not for fame or recognition, but to create lasting change for those who had been left behind by society. As Evelyn continued to speak, James listened intently, absorbing every word. She spoke not of wealth or status, but of the responsibility that came with privilege, of the obligation to use one's resources to help those who needed it most. I didn't just build this foundation for show, she said, her gaze fixed on him. It's about impact. It's about giving people the tools they need to rise above their circumstances. And now, it's your turn to make sure that happens. Her voice softened, almost imperceptibly. I trust you, James. I see something in you that's rare, something that this world desperately needs. Resilience, compassion, and the courage to fight for what's right, even when it seems impossible. You are more capable than you think. The weight of her words hit him like a tidal wave. She wasn't just entrusting him with an organization. She was entrusting him with her legacy. Her vision of a better world. He could feel the pressure mounting. Yet a strange sense of clarity began to form within him. Despite his doubts, despite the overwhelming responsibility, Evelyn was right. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about something much bigger. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Evelyn nodded, her eyes softening. "You don't have to thank me, James," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You've earned this." The days that followed were a blur of meetings, briefings, and new challenges. James found himself delving deep into the foundation's work, meeting with staff members, and learning about the projects that had been set in motion before him. He visited community centers, schools, and shelters, each one a testament to Evelyn's tireless efforts. With each visit, his understanding of her mission deepened, and his commitment to carrying it forward grew stronger. But as the days passed, Evelyn's health began to decline rapidly. She became frailer, her movements slower, her once vibrant presence now tinged with fragility. Despite her physical decline, Evelyn never stopped. She continued to meet with donors, attend meetings, and oversee the foundation's projects with the same unwavering determination she had shown all her life. But James could see the toll it was taking on her. He began to fear that time was running out, not just for Evelyn, but for the work she had entrusted to him. One evening, Evelyn called him into her study, her voice quieter than usual. She was sitting at her desk, surrounded by piles of papers, her cane resting at her side. "James," she said, her gaze unwavering, "I know the road ahead will be difficult for you. I know the challenges you will face will seem insurmountable at times. But I want you to remember one thing. Don't let fear stop you. You have everything you need to succeed." James nodded, though his heart felt heavy. Her faith in him, though comforting, only made the weight of his responsibility feel greater. He had already sacrificed so much for his family. Could he really live up to the vision she had for him? The next few days were a blur of preparation. James found himself juggling meetings and his new role with the pressure of his family's struggles. But through it all, Evelyn's words resonated within him. "You are stronger than you think." It was a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight, that the foundation, and the people it served, depended on him. He was no longer just a young man trying to survive. He was a leader, a steward of Evelyn's legacy, and he would carry it forward, no matter the cost. As the days grew darker and Evelyn's health began to fail, James could feel a spark of hope beginning to ignite inside him. He wasn't ready to give up, not now, not ever. This was his chance to make a difference, to build something that would last long after Evelyn was gone. And no matter what obstacles lay ahead, he would continue to push forward, determined to honor her faith in him. James sat on the edge of the massive desk in Evelyn's study, feeling the weight of the room's silence pressing down on him. He had spent the last few days buried in the foundation's files, learning, absorbing, adjusting, but nothing could prepare him for the moment that had now arrived. Evelyn's health was deteriorating faster than he'd anticipated. Her once vibrant energy was now a mere shadow, her movements slower, her voice weaker, yet her resolve had never wavered. She had passed on the torch to him, and the reality of it was finally settling in. Evelyn, despite her frailty, still held herself with an air of command. She had built this empire with her own two hands, and now, she was entrusting it all to him. Her voice broke the quiet, calm but laced with the urgency of someone who knew time was no longer a luxury she had. "James," she said softly, as she gestured for him to sit, "it's time to start taking the reins fully. I've prepared everything for you, financial records, ongoing projects, contacts, and plans. But it's not just about the paperwork. It's about the heart of this work, the people." Her eyes were tired, but they burned with the same intensity that had driven her for decades. She wasn't just passing on a legacy, she was offering him a future that could change the lives of countless individuals, if he could rise to the challenge. Evelyn slid a thick folder across the desk, and James felt the weight of it in more than just its physical form. Inside, it wasn't just information, it was a blueprint for hope. A map that could lead him to transform the lives of people who had long been forgotten by the system. "People will doubt you," Evelyn continued, her voice steady despite the heaviness in the air. They will question you, look at you with skepticism, tell you you're not enough. But remember, James, I didn't build this to impress people. I built this for the ones who need us the most. And now, I'm trusting you to continue what we started." James felt his throat tighten as he nodded, his hands gripping the folder, unsure if he was ready, if he was enough. But deep down, he knew there was no turning back. This wasn't just about the foundation, it was about every community, every struggling family, every child who needed an opportunity. It was about his family, and the legacy Evelyn had already begun to build for them. As the days wore on, Evelyn's condition worsened. The meetings, the conferences, the community visits, she attended them all. But each time, it became harder for her to keep up. Her energy seemed to fade with every step she took, and James could see it. But what struck him the most was how little she let that stop her. She didn't slow down, she didn't quit. Instead, she pressed on, her frailty not hindering her drive, but fueling it. She kept telling him, "You need to learn this. You need to see this for yourself." She didn't want him just reading reports or getting secondhand knowledge. She wanted him to feel the impact of the work. She wanted him to witness the lives they were changing firsthand, to carry it in his heart like she had done for years. And so, James went, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes eagerly, to see the projects Evelyn had started. He visited schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, spoke to families in shelters, and sat with those who had been touched by the foundation's work. Each visit added another layer to the understanding that was slowly forming in his mind. This was bigger than any one person. This was a movement, a cause, a lifeline for people who needed hope. And now, it was his responsibility to ensure that hope kept burning, that the light they had fought to ignite would not fade. One afternoon, after a particularly draining visit, Evelyn summoned James to her study. She was sitting at her desk, looking frailer than usual, but there was a fire in her eyes that made him stop in his tracks. "I know it's hard, James," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "But you must remember why we're doing this. It's not about the position, or the title, or the money. It's about the change we can create, together. And I believe in you. I know you can do this." That moment, as she spoke to him, reminded James of the weight of the trust she had placed in him. She wasn't just passing on a foundation or a legacy, she was handing him a chance to make a real difference. To change the world for those who needed it most. It wasn't easy, and it wouldn't ever be. But as he looked into her eyes, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a spark of something stronger than doubt. Evelyn was preparing him, not for the job, but for the journey ahead. And as he left her study that day, he knew that it wouldn't be enough to simply continue her work. He had to live it, breathe it, make it his own. The foundation's future was now in his hands, and the people they served were waiting. He wasn't just carrying Evelyn's legacy, he was building his own. James stood at the podium, his hands gripping the edges as he faced the crowd of skeptical eyes. The grand ballroom was filled with well-dressed donors, board members, and community leaders, their faces a mixture of curiosity and doubt. It was a gala for the foundation, one of the most important events of the year. And yet, for James, it felt like the beginning of something far more daunting than a fundraising event. This was his moment to prove not just to the room, but to himself that he could live up to the legacy Evelyn had entrusted him with. He took a deep breath and started, his voice steady despite the storm of nerves churning inside him. "Thank you, Linda," he said, nodding toward the senior board member who had introduced him. The crowd clapped politely, but James barely noticed. His gaze shifted across the room. There were so many people. So many doubts. "Do I really belong here?" he thought. But before he could allow the thought to paralyze him, he pressed on. "When Evelyn Walker first gave me the responsibility of running this foundation, I'll admit, I didn't think I was ready. I was young, inexperienced, and full of doubt. But one thing I knew for sure, Evelyn believed in me. She saw something in me, something I couldn't yet see in myself." He paused, letting the words sink in. He had never been a natural public speaker. But this wasn't just about words, it was about the lives that depended on the foundation. He could feel the weight of their stories in his chest, the lives they were changing, the hope they were igniting. "This foundation isn't about power or prestige," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's about people. The ones who need us the most, the ones who have been overlooked, ignored, left behind. We've provided scholarships, job training, emergency services, and so much more, but we're not done. There's still so much work to be done. James felt a surge of passion as he spoke, the words flowing freely now. He could see the faces in the crowd softening, some even nodding along. This was more than just a speech, it was his promise to them, to Evelyn, and to himself. This vocational training center, he gestured toward the bustling group in the back of the room. This is just one example of what happens when we take action. It's a place where people don't just get new skills, they get new opportunities, new futures. And it's not just about education. It's about empowerment. It's about giving someone the tools to stand on their own, to rebuild their lives. A sense of clarity washed over him as he spoke. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't just a student in a room full of teachers, he was a leader, with the power to shape lives. His words echoed in the room, but they were more than just noise, they were a message. This is our mission, and I will make sure it continues. He finished his speech with a firm promise, his voice ringing through the ballroom. Evelyn believed that anyone, regardless of their background, could make a difference, and I will make sure her legacy lives on. By continuing this fight, we are all in this together. The applause that followed was louder than he expected. There was still skepticism, still doubt in the room, but it was no longer as loud as it had been before. James stood there, heart pounding, but with a quiet satisfaction. For the first time since he had taken over, he felt like he had the strength to carry this burden, to lead. The evening went on, but James couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but for the first time, he was no longer overwhelmed. Instead, he felt an undeniable clarity, a drive to push forward, no matter the obstacles. This wasn't just a legacy to uphold, this was a movement to fuel. And as he stepped off the podium and mingled with the guests, he knew that whatever came next, he was ready. The weeks following the gala had been a whirlwind for James. He spent each day at the foundation, meeting with staff, visiting ongoing projects, and answering endless questions from donors who weren't convinced he could handle the responsibility. Yet, despite the resistance, he found himself growing into the role, each day a new lesson in leadership. But just as he began to feel a small sense of control, another challenge reared its head. A major donor, one of the foundation's biggest supporters, had raised doubts about his leadership. It was the kind of meeting James had feared, formal, tense, and filled with judgment. The large conference room was dimly lit, the long table glossy and cold beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. He sat at one end, facing the donor, Mr. Willard Hayes, a man who had been a cornerstone of the foundation's success. Hayes, older and sharp-eyed, leaned back in his chair with a disapproving look on his face. James could feel the weight of his gaze pressing down on him, like he was already being judged. "You're young," Hayes began, his voice steady but cold. "And while we respect Evelyn's wishes, her decision to hand this foundation over to you, well, it's a risk. Your lack of experience is a serious concern. What makes you think you can handle this responsibility? What qualifications do you have that can possibly compare to hers?" The words cut through James, but he refused to let his composure falter. He knew this was coming. He knew it wouldn't be easy. But this was his fight now. Evelyn had entrusted him with this mission, and he wasn't about to back down. With a deep breath, he locked eyes with Hayes and spoke, his voice firm, unwavering. "I may not have decades of experience like you do, Mr. Hayes, but I have something that matters just as much: determination, compassion, and a deep understanding of the struggles we're here to fight. Evelyn believed in me. She believed that I could continue this work, and I'm not going to let her down." James could feel his heart racing, his hands clenched into fists under the table, but he didn't look away. "This isn't about me, Mr. Hayes. It's about the people who need us, the people who have been left behind, ignored, and forgotten. If we only focus on experience, we'll miss the opportunity to change lives. And that's what I'm here for, to make a real difference." For a moment, the room was silent. The tension hung in the air, thick and palpable, but James didn't flinch. He stood his ground. Finally, Hayes leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "You've got guts," I'll give you that, he said, his tone still skeptical. But talk is cheap. You'd better deliver. James nodded, a surge of determination flooding through him. I will. I'm not here to make empty promises. I'm here to do the work that matters. I'll show you, and everyone else, that this foundation's future is in good hands. The meeting ended with little fanfare. But James knew that something had shifted. Hayes had challenged him, but in doing so, he had unwittingly given James the clarity he needed. This wasn't about winning everyone's approval, it was about fighting for those who had no voice. And as he left the room, he felt a newfound sense of confidence. The road ahead was still uncertain. But James knew one thing for sure: he would not be swayed. He would lead with integrity, with purpose, and he would prove to everyone, including himself, that he was the right person for this job. The day of the grand opening arrived, and James stood outside the newly renovated vocational training center, his heart pounding with excitement and nerves. This event wasn't just another milestone, it was the proof of his hard work and the legacy Evelyn had entrusted him to carry forward. As the community gathered, the atmosphere buzzed with hope and anticipation. The bright faces of families, teachers, and volunteers reflected the tangible difference this project would make in their lives. James adjusted his tie, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. He had always found public speaking daunting, and this moment, standing before a crowd of eager faces, was one of the most important of his life. The podium, polished and grand, felt like a mountain he had to climb. But he knew he couldn't afford to falter now. As Linda Grayson, one of the senior board members, finished her introduction with a round of polite applause, James felt a rush of emotions. This was it. This was his moment. He stepped forward, his hands gripping the edges of the podium to steady his trembling fingers. The room was filled with expectant faces, many of whom had witnessed the foundation's transformation over the last few months. James cleared his throat, trying to steady his breath. "Thank you, Linda," he began, his voice steady, but his heart still racing. "And thank you to everyone here today. This isn't just a ribbon-cutting ceremony, it's a celebration of everything we've worked toward. It's a reflection of what happens when we come together to create real change." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of community members whose lives were about to change. Some faces were familiar: students, parents, and workers from the projects he had visited. Others were newcomers, filled with curiosity about the young man standing at the podium. He could feel their skepticism, but more importantly, he felt their hope. "When Evelyn Walker entrusted me with her foundation, I won't lie, I wasn't sure I was the right person for this job. I was young, inexperienced, and full of doubts, but Evelyn believed in me. She saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She told me that change doesn't happen overnight. It's built through persistence, dedication, and faith in the power of people. And that's exactly what we're doing here today." A wave of emotion washed over James, and for a brief moment, he struggled to maintain his composure. He thought of Evelyn, her quiet strength, her unshakable belief in him. This center, this place where people can come to learn new skills, find better jobs, and build brighter futures. It's just one example of what we can accomplish when we refuse to accept the status quo. It's not just about teaching. It's about changing lives. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. As he scanned the room, he saw faces lighting up with understanding. It wasn't just about the building or the programs, it was about the community, the people he was fighting for. Evelyn often said that a legacy isn't about wealth or fame. It's about the lives we touch along the way. She left us a legacy of hope, and it's up to us to carry it forward. The room erupted in applause, louder and warmer than he expected. James stepped back from the podium, a mixture of pride and humility swelling in his chest. As he mingled with the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging words with attendees, a young man approached him, his expression earnest. "Mr. Carter, I just wanted to thank you," the man said. "This center, it's going to change everything for me and my family. I've been out of work for months, and now, I have a chance to learn something new." James's heart tightened, a lump in his throat. "I'm glad to hear that," he replied, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "That's exactly why we're here, to give people a second chance." As the crowd began to thin and the evening air grew cooler, James found a quiet spot outside. The city was bathed in a soft, golden light as the sun dipped below the horizon. James gazed at the skyline, his thoughts drifting. He thought of the journey that had brought him here, the struggles, the sacrifices, the doubts, and the moments of triumph. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Evelyn's legacy was no longer just something he inherited, it had become something he believed in. Something he was now fighting for. Back at the estate that night, as he sat in Evelyn's study surrounded by her journals and letters, James felt a quiet resolve settle over him. He had proven himself. He had stepped into a role that many thought he wasn't ready for. And now, he had begun to shape the future that Evelyn had hoped for. The road ahead was still long, still uncertain, but for the first time in his life, James felt ready, not because he had all the answers, but because he understood that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about persistence, compassion, and the willingness to keep moving forward. And as the night stretched on, he made a silent vow to keep pushing forward, no matter how difficult the journey might become. As the grand ceremony for the vocational training center approached, James found himself standing at the edge of a new chapter, his heart pounding in anticipation. The room was alive with energy, filled with the hopeful faces of families, staff, and supporters who had come to witness the realization of what had once seemed impossible. This moment wasn't just a celebration of the opening of a new wing. It was a testament to what could be accomplished when people dared to challenge the odds. James adjusted his tie, trying to steady his nerves. The weight of Evelyn's legacy in the eyes of the room on him felt overwhelming. But he knew he couldn't let that paralyze him now. This was his moment to prove that he was ready, that he could lead with purpose and vision, just as Evelyn had entrusted him to do. When Linda Grayson, the senior board member, finished her speech with polite applause, James felt his stomach churn. The moment had arrived. The applause washed over him, and he stepped forward to the podium, his legs feeling like lead as he crossed the stage. His hands gripped the edges of the podium, his palms damp with sweat. As he looked out over the audience, he saw the familiar faces of those whose lives were about to change, and the unfamiliar ones, investors, community leaders, and skeptics who still doubted his ability to carry this work forward. But in this moment, it didn't matter. This was about more than him. It was about the people whose lives were touched by the work Evelyn had started. And now, it was his turn to lead them. "Thank you, Linda," he began, his voice steady despite the thunder of his heartbeat. "And thank you to everyone here today. This isn't just about cutting ribbons or showing off a new building. This is about change, real, tangible change. It's about what happens when we come together and refuse to accept the status quo." He took a breath, trying to steady himself, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "When Evelyn Walker entrusted me with her foundation, I won't lie, I didn't know if I was the right person for this job. I was young, inexperienced, and full of doubts, but Evelyn believed in me. She saw something in me that I couldn't even see in myself. And she told me something that stuck with me. Change doesn't happen overnight. It's built through persistence, dedication, and belief in the power of people." As he scanned the room, James caught the eyes of people who were here for more than just a ceremony. They were here because they had placed their trust in Evelyn's vision. And now they were looking at him to carry that forward. For the first time that evening, he felt their hope, not just their skepticism. This center, the programs we're offering, the people we're empowering, it's just one piece of the larger puzzle. It's not about buildings, books, or budgets. It's about creating opportunities where there were none. It's about breaking the cycle of poverty and injustice that holds people back. It's about creating a future where anyone, no matter their background, has a shot at a better life. The room fell silent for a moment, and James felt a wave of emotion well up in his chest. He thought of Evelyn, of her quiet strength, her unwavering belief in him, and how much she had poured into this mission. Evelyn often said that a legacy isn't about wealth or fame. It's about the lives we touch. It's about the people we lift up. She left us a legacy of hope, and it's up to us to carry it forward. The applause that followed was more than just polite. It was genuine, heartfelt, and for James, it was a moment of validation. He wasn't just standing on a podium anymore, he was standing in the shoes of a leader. Someone who had earned the right to be there. As the crowd cheered, He stepped back, his chest swelling with pride and a deep sense of responsibility. He had done it, he had found his voice. Afterward, as he mingled with the crowd, a young man approached him, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Mr. Carter, I just wanted to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This center, it's going to change everything for me and my family. I've been out of work for months. And now I finally have a chance to learn something new. You've given us hope." James felt a lump form in his throat, his heart tightening with a mixture of pride and humility. "I'm glad to hear that," he replied, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "That's why we're here, to give people a second chance." As the event wound down and the crowd began to thin, James stepped outside into the cool evening air. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light over the city. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe in the calm, letting the peace of the moment settle in. He thought about how far he had come, from the overwhelmed student who had stumbled into Evelyn's world, to the man now standing at the forefront of it, ready to lead. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Evelyn's legacy was now his, and he would carry it forward, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. The story of James Carter teaches us the power of perseverance, compassion, and the willingness to embrace difficult choices in order to change the lives of those who need it most. It reminds us that leadership is not about being perfect, but about having the courage to move forward, even when the odds are stacked against us. James's journey shows that the right kind of strength isn't about individual success, but about using your resources and abilities to uplift others and leave a lasting impact. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope, determination, and change to inspire others. Thank you for being a part of this journey.